The morning mist hung thick over Windsor Castle as King Charles III paced restlessly in his private study. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a sealed envelope that had arrived just hours before dawn. The contents of that letter would change everything he thought he knew about the royal succession and the delicate balance of power within the monarchy. For months, Charles had been receiving troubling reports from his most trusted advisors. Whispers echoed through the palace corridors about Camilla's growing influence over critical royal decisions. What had started as supportive partnership had slowly transformed into something more concerning. The queen consort had begun making unilateral choices about state functions, charitable patronages, and even matters of protocol that traditionally required the monarch's direct approval. The breaking point came when Charles discovered that Camilla had secretly met with several Commonwealth representatives without his knowledge. She had apparently discussed potential changes to royal succession laws, suggesting modifications that would grant her unprecedented authority even after Charles's eventual passing. The audacity of these private negotiations shocked the king to his core. Charles remembered the conversation he had overheard just 3 days earlier. Camilla had been speaking with her private secretary, discussing plans to restructure the royal household in ways that would diminish Catherine's future role as queen. The Princess of Wales, who had proven herself time and again as a dedicated royal family member, was being systematically pushed aside in favor of Camilla's own vision for the monarchy's future. The sealed envelope contained photographic evidence and documented proof of these secret meetings. Charles's hands shook as he examined each piece of evidence. Bank statements showed suspicious payments to foreign consultants. Meeting logs revealed gatherings that had never appeared on official royal calendars. Most damning of all were recorded conversations where Camilla openly discussed her plans to maintain control even after Charles was no longer able to fulfill his duties as neat monarch. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the ancient castle windows, Charles made his decision. He reached for his official seal and began drafting what would become one of the most significant royal decrees in modern British history. His pen moved swiftly across the parchment as he wrote words that would strip Camilla of many powers she had accumulated and officially transfer those responsibilities to Catherine, the future queen. The king knew this decision would create waves throughout the royal establishment. Palace staff, government officials, and the public would all be shocked by such a dramatic shift. But Charles understood that decisive action was necessary to preserve the integrity of the crown and ensure a smooth transition of power when the time came for William and Catherine to take their rightful place as the next generation of royal leadership. Charles called for his most senior aide and instructed him to prepare for an emergency announcement. The decree would be issued within hours, catching everyone off guard, but sending a clear message about where true royal authority resided. The king's decision was final, and there would be no room for negotiation or compromise on this matter. The emergency meeting was called for 7 o'clock sharp, an unprecedented time that sent shockwaves through the royal household. Senior staff members hurried through the castle corridors, their footsteps echoing against stone walls that had witnessed centuries of royal drama. Nobody knew what to expect, but the urgency in the king's voice when he summoned them suggested something extraordinary was about to unfold. Camilla entered the grand meeting room completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. She had spent the previous evening planning her upcoming tour of Scotland, where she intended to announce several new initiatives under her personal patronage. In her mind, she was simply fulfilling her duties as queen consort, perhaps even exceeding expectations by showing such dedication to royal responsibilities. The room fell silent as King Charles entered, carrying himself with a gravity that immediately commanded attention. His usually gentle demeanor had been replaced by something much more serious and determined. Palace staff, who had worked with the royal family for decades, could sense that this was no ordinary meeting. The king's eyes held a steely resolve that few had ever witnessed before. Charles began speaking in measured tones, explaining that recent events had forced him to make difficult decisions about the structure of royal authority. He detailed how certain boundaries had been crossed, and how the traditional chain of command within the monarchy had been compromised. Every word was carefully chosen, leaving no room for misinterpretation about the seriousness of the situation. Camilla's face grew pale. As the full implications of the king's words began to sink in, she realized that her private meetings had somehow been discovered, and that her carefully laid plans were crumbling before her eyes. The queen consort tried to maintain her composure, but those present could see the shock and dismay written across her features as Charles continued his announcement. The king then revealed the evidence that had come to light, speaking about unauthorized meetings, exceeded authorities, and decisions made without proper consultation. He emphasized that while Camilla's intentions may have been rooted in dedication to the crown, the methods she had employed were unacceptable and threatened the stability of the monarchy itself. As Charles outlined the specific powers that would be transferred to Catherine, the tension in the room became almost unbearable. Senior staff exchanged nervous glances while trying to process the magnitude of what they were witnessing. This was not just a simple reorganization of duties, but a fundamental shift in the royal power structure that would have lasting implications for years to come. The king's announcement continued with details about Catherine's proven track record of service, her deep understanding of constitutional matters, and her natural ability to represent the crown with dignity and wisdom. He praised the Princess of Wales for her unwavering commitment to royal duties and her respectful approach to the traditions and protocols that governed royal behavior. Camilla finally found her voice and attempted to defend her actions, explaining that everything she had done was in service to the monarchy, but Charles firmly but respectfully cut her off, making it clear that the decision was final and that the emergency decree would be issued within the hour, regardless of any objections or explanations. Catherine was in the middle of reading bedtime stories to her children when the urgent call came from Windsor Castle. The Princess of Wales immediately sensed something serious had happened from the tone of the royal secretary's voice. She quickly arranged for William to take over with the children and made her way to the castle, her mind racing with possibilities about what could require such immediate attention. The drive through the English countryside gave Catherine time to think about the recent changes she had noticed within the royal household. There had been subtle shifts in protocol meetings she wasn't invited to, and decisions made about royal engagements without her input. She had mentioned these concerns to William, who had assured her that palace politics were always complicated, and that she shouldn't worry too much about temporary adjustments. Upon arriving at Windsor Castle, Catherine was immediately escorted to the king's private chambers rather than the usual meeting rooms. This unusual arrangement suggested that whatever was happening was deeply personal and confidential. The guards and staff she passed seemed unusually tense, their expressions revealing that something significant was taking place behind the castle's ancient walls. King Charles greeted Catherine with a mixture of warmth and solemnity that she had rarely seen before. He began by apologizing for the late hour and the urgent nature of the summons, but explained that circumstances had forced his hand in ways he never anticipated. The king's words carried weight that immediately put Catherine on high alert about the seriousness of the situation. Charles then carefully explained the discoveries he had made about Camilla's unauthorized activities and the evidence that had been presented to him. He detailed how the queen consort had overstepped her authority in multiple areas and had made decisions that threatened to undermine the traditional structure of the monarchy. Catherine listened in stunned silence as the full scope of the situation became clear. The king praised Catherine for her consistent dedication to royal duties and her respectful approach to palace protocols. He emphasized how she had never sought to expand her authority beyond appropriate boundaries and had always consulted proper channels before taking significant actions. This track record of responsible behavior had played a crucial role in his decision to transfer certain powers to her. Catherine felt overwhelmed by the sudden responsibility being placed upon her shoulders. She had always expected to gradually assume greater duties as she and William moved closer to their eventual roles as monarch and queen. However, this immediate transfer of authority from Camilla represented a dramatic acceleration of that timeline and a level of responsibility she hadn't fully prepared for. Charles assured Catherine that she wouldn't be facing these new responsibilities alone, A team of experienced advisors would be assigned to help her navigate the transition, and William would be briefed on the situation so he could provide support from his position as heir to the throne. The king emphasized that this decision was about protecting the monarchy's future and ensuring proper constitutional order. The conversation continued, with detailed explanations of the specific authorities that would be transferred to Catherine. These included oversight of certain royal patronages, approval authority for specific state functions, and representation responsibilities at important Commonwealth events. Each new duty came with established protocols and support systems that would help ease the transition process. As the meeting concluded, Catherine accepted her new responsibilities with the grace and dignity that had characterized her entire royal career. She understood that this moment represented not just a personal challenge, but a crucial test of her ability to uphold the traditions and values that had sustained the British monarchy for generations. The emergency decree was prepared in the ancient script room, where royal proclamations had been drafted for hundreds of years. Palace scribes worked through the early morning hours, their careful penmanship ensuring that every word of the king's decision was recorded with perfect precision. The weight of history seemed to press down upon them as they realized they were documenting one of the most significant royal announcements in decades. News of the impending announcement began to leak through palace corridors. Despite strict orders for confidentiality, kitchen staff whispered among themselves as they prepared breakfast trays. Security personnel exchanged knowing glances during shift changes. The royal household buzzed with nervous energy as everyone sensed that something extraordinary was about to be revealed to the world. Camilla spent the morning in her private apartments, struggling to process the magnitude of what had occurred. Her carefully crafted plans for expanding royal influence had not only been discovered, but had resulted in a dramatic reversal of her position. The queen consort found herself facing the loss of authorities she had worked months to acquire, along with the personal humiliation of having her loyalty to the crown questioned. Meanwhile, government officials began receiving cryptic messages about an urgent royal announcement scheduled for later that day. The Prime Minister's office was contacted directly by the king's private secretary, who provided only the most basic details about timing and significance. Constitutional experts were quietly consulted about the legal implications of major changes to royal authority. During the king's lifetime, the media started picking up on unusual activity around royal residences as photographers noticed increased security presence and the movement of official vehicles. Royal correspondents began making urgent phone calls to their sources within the palace, trying to piece together clues about what might be happening. Social media started buzzing with speculation as royal watchers shared observations about the unusual morning activities. Catherine used the hours before the official announcement to prepare herself mentally for the challenges ahead. She reviewed briefing documents about her new responsibilities and consulted with senior advisors who would help guide her through the transition. The Princess of Wales understood that public scrutiny of this decision would be intense and that she needed to be ready for questions about why such dramatic changes were necessary. William was briefed on the situation by his father in a private conversation that lasted nearly 2 hours. The Prince of Wales expressed both surprise and support for the king's decision, understanding that protecting the integrity of the monarchy sometimes required difficult choices. He assured his father that he and Catherine would work together to ensure a smooth transition of the transferred authorities. Palace communications staff worked frantically to prepare official statements and briefing materials for the media. They had to craft language that explained the king's decision without unnecessarily damaging Camilla's reputation or creating constitutional confusion. The challenge was communicating the necessity of the changes while maintaining dignity for all parties involved. As noon approached, final preparations were made for the public announcement. The king reviewed the decree one last time, ensuring that every detail was correct and that the language clearly conveyed his intentions. He knew that this decision would be analyzed by constitutional scholars, political commentators, and the general public for years to come. The atmosphere throughout the palace remained tense as staff members prepared for the moment when this internal royal drama would become public knowledge. Everyone understood that this announcement would mark a turning point in the modern history of the British monarchy and would likely influence how royal authority was structured for future generations. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the royal announcement was released simultaneously to all major news outlets and published on official palace channels. The headline sent shockwaves through newsrooms across Britain and around the world as journalists scrambled to understand the full implications of King Charles's emergency decree. Within minutes, breaking news alerts were appearing on television screens and mobile phones throughout the Commonwealth. The public reaction was immediate and intense. Social media platforms exploded with commentary from royal supporters, constitutional experts, and ordinary citizens trying to process this unexpected development. Some praised the king for taking decisive action to protect royal traditions, while others questioned whether such dramatic changes were necessary or appropriate during his reign. Television news channels interrupted regular programming to provide live coverage of the announcement and its potential consequences. Royal correspondents who had covered the family for decades admitted they had never witnessed such a significant shift in royal authority during a monarch's lifetime. Constitutional scholars were brought in to explain the legal precedents and implications of the king's decision. Camilla's supporters within royal circles began quietly organizing to provide alternative perspectives on the situation. They argued that her actions had been motivated by genuine dedication to the crown, and that the punishment seemed disproportionate to any mistakes that might have been made. However, these voices were largely overshadowed by the official palace narrative and the evidence that had been presented to support the king's decision. Catherine's first public appearance following the announcement came during a scheduled visit to a children's hospital that afternoon. The Princess of Wales handled questions about her expanded role with characteristic grace and diplomacy, emphasizing her commitment to serving the monarchy and the British people. Her composed response helped reassure the public that the transition would be handled professionally and responsibly. International reaction to the announcement varied significantly across different countries and political systems. Commonwealth nations expressed continued support for the monarchy, while noting their interest in how these changes might affect royal representation in their regions. European royal families watched the situation closely, understanding that such dramatic internal restructuring could set precedents for other monarchies facing similar challenges. Financial markets initially showed some volatility as investors tried to assess whether the royal drama might have broader implications for British political stability. However, most analysts concluded that the changes were internal royal matters that were unlikely to significantly impact government operations or economic policies. Palace staff began implementing the practical aspects of transferring authority from Camilla to Catherine. This involved updating official protocols, revising security arrangements, and reorganizing various royal households to reflect the new power structure. The process was complex and required coordination among multiple departments within the royal establishment. The king spent the afternoon in meetings with senior government officials, ensuring that all constitutional requirements were being met and that the transition would not create any legal complications. The Prime Minister expressed full support for the monarch's decisions while requesting regular updates about how the changes might affect government interactions with the royal household. Public opinion polls conducted in the hours immediately following the announcement showed a mixed but generally supportive response to the king's actions. Many Britons expressed confidence in Catherine's ability to handle her expanded responsibilities, while others worried about the precedent of such dramatic changes to royal authority during a monarch's reign. As evening approached, palace officials began preparing for the intensive media scrutiny that would continue for weeks or months to come. They understood that every aspect of this decision would be analyzed and debated, requiring careful management of information and consistent communication of the king's rationale for taking such unprecedented action. 3 weeks after the emergency decree, the royal household had settled into its new rhythm under the restructured authority arrangements. Catherine had seamlessly assumed her expanded responsibilities, demonstrating the same dedication and attention to detail that had characterized her royal service since joining the family. Her first major decision involved reorganizing several charitable patronages to better serve their intended beneficiaries, a move that was widely praised by both the organizations involved and the general public. The transition period revealed just how extensive Camilla's unauthorized influence had become. Palace auditors discovered additional evidence of decisions made without proper consultation, including financial commitments that had been made to various organizations without following established protocols. These findings vindicated King Charles's decision and demonstrated that his actions had been necessary. To prevent further complications, Camilla gradually adapted to her reduced role within the royal household, focusing on a smaller number of carefully selected patronages and appearances. While the initial shock and disappointment of losing her expanded authority remained difficult to process, she began to understand that her overreach had created an unsustainable situation that required correction. The queen consort worked with palace advisors to develop a more appropriate scope of activities that respected traditional boundaries. International observers noted how smoothly the transition had been managed despite its dramatic nature. Other constitutional monarchies studied the British approach to internal royal restructuring, recognizing that similar situations might arise in their own countries. The successful handling of such a delicate situation enhanced the reputation of the British monarchy for stability and adaptability. Catherine's first major international engagement under her expanded authority came during a Commonwealth summit where she represented the royal family in high-level diplomatic discussions. Her performance impressed foreign dignitaries and government officials, who praised her understanding of constitutional matters and her ability to communicate effectively with representatives from diverse cultural backgrounds. King Charles reflected privately on the difficult decisions he had been forced to make. While the process had been painful for all involved, he felt confident that protecting the integrity of royal authority was essential for the monarchy's future. The king's decisive action had prevented a potential constitutional crisis and ensured that proper protocols would be maintained for future generations. The long-term impact of the emergency decree began to emerge as constitutional experts analyzed its implications for royal succession and authority. Many concluded that Charles had established important precedents for how monarchs should handle situations where royal authority is exceeded or misused. These precedents would likely influence how future kings and queens approach similar challenges. Public support for the royal family remained strong throughout the transition period, with opinion polls showing increased confidence in the monarchy's ability to manage internal challenges. Citizens appreciated the transparency of the king's actions and the professionalism displayed by all parties during the difficult process. Catherine's grace under pressure particularly impressed the public and strengthened her position as a future queen. The media eventually shifted its focus from the dramatic circumstances of the decree to the positive outcomes that had resulted from the changes. Stories about Catherine's successful handling of her new responsibilities and the improved efficiency of royal operations dominated coverage. The initial controversy gave way to recognition that the king's difficult decision had ultimately strengthened the monarchy. As the months passed, the emergency decree came to be seen as a defining moment in King Charles's reign and a demonstration of his commitment to constitutional principles. The successful transition of authority from Camilla to Catherine proved that the monarchy could adapt to internal challenges while maintaining its essential character and public service mission. The royal family emerged from the crisis stronger and more united in their commitment to serving the British people with dignity and integrity.